When we first looked into the issue with the USS Fitzgerald, there was a couple of questions that stood out in the minds of even a layman. The first question was, how could such a nimble ship like a destroyer not be able to get out of the way of that slow, lumbering, moving mountain of a vessel like the ACX Crystal was? We've seen videos where this thing can turn on a dime. I mean, it can literally do a full 180 in less than 2 minutes. That was question one. Question two, why did they wait so long to contact their command authority? Why was it almost an hour later? It would have seemed like it would have made top 5 things to do. You know, like I said before, these crews can walk and chew gum at the same time. It's not like every single person was worried about flood control. But I think this article here today that we're going to cover, came out yesterday, is going to shed a little bit of light on now what more than likely happened. I think they tried to sneak this out without anybody really paying attention to it. And if you didn't do an investigation into the Fitzgerald and these destroyers and what they were doing, you probably wouldn't think much of this article. Now, a couple months back, the father of Xavier Martin had come to the channel and made mention of the Fitzgerald losing power 9 days prior, completely going dark, and it never being reported and no one ever covering it. There's really nothing online about it. And according to him, it lost power, and within about 30 minutes, they were able to bring power back up. I think that's key. That's a key piece of information from someone who would know. This was someone who had a sailor, a relative who was actually aboard the Fitzgerald. So the information, and both him and his son were both former sailors, so I trust their information to be accurate and correct. This hybrid drive in this first article that we were talking about, that they say that they're canceling, we covered in another video talking about another thing. It was actually the video where we talked about the destroyer that might have shot down that missile that was coming into Hawaii. When we talked about how, at the time, North Korea was conducting a lot of ballistic missile warfare exercises. They were launching missiles, and it was just about an every month occurrence or every 2-week occurrence that we would see something out of them. And I had mentioned that I was thinking they were lining up to hit Hawaii because of the flight time of one missile directly correlating with the exact amount of time of that false missile warning in Hawaii. Well, anyway, in that video, I talked about how they have these hybrid electric drives that allow them to run slowly and quietly. And here, I brought it up in the Arleigh Burke Destroyer Wiki. In 2016, Navy announced they would begin outfitting 34-flight 2A Arleigh Burke vessels with hybrid electric drive to lower fuel costs. Attached to the main reduction gear to turn the drive shaft to propel the ship at speeds under 13 knots, such as during ballistic missile defense or maritime security operations. So, this would be something where they wouldn't be able to move very fast at the time that they were using this. It would save fuel, but apparently the problem with it, according to this article, is that it draws too much energy off of their generators. And they're citing department priorities here, but they say something in this that's going to absolutely make you lose your mind. The gear, of course, developed with L3, was designed to switch power to the drive shaft, turn the ship's propellers, speeds below 13 knots, night steaming. At those speeds, the ship could perform night steaming, ballistic missile defense, or anti-submarine operations. Night steaming. That's interesting, because that's when this happened, at night. Destroyers have 3 generators, 2 of which run while a third remains on standby, which rotates through while generators are down for maintenance or in case of an emergency. running the electrical motor that turned the shaft while also running the ship's power-hungry radars and related system, maxed out the capacity of those generators. Now read this. At that point, you are a light switch flipping on away from winking out the whole ship. Let me say that again. At that point, you are a light switch flipping on away from winking out the whole ship. Well, isn't that interesting? Apparently they say they weren't as efficient as they would hope they would be. Well, I think that might be just a euphemism for saying that they give this ship a giant hiccup when it comes to changing over from electric to full power. Because back in the report, what do we see? The officer of the deck ordered course to the right to course 240 true, but rescinded the order within a minute. Instead, the officer of the deck ordered an increase to full speed and a rapid turn to port. These orders were not carried out. Now, we've always thought that these orders were not carried out was just a refusal. But if they were attempting to go from night steaming to full power while these things were engaged, they could have just flipped a breaker. And in the middle of this whole trying to avoid, the whole thing could have gone dead and just sat there. And then kaboom, got hit. And that would jive with what the captain of the ACX Crystal said. He said this thing suddenly steamed into its path and stopped. And when we look at the damage, we don't see any scraping. We see a dead-on hit, like a ship was dead in the water. And we thought about EMPs, and we thought about, what could have done this. And now we see that there might have been this issue. There's also this other issue that I brought up with this laser that they're talking about, this Law's laser system, and how it uses these fiber optics to do this. And they talk about it being aboard the Ponce. But they were talking about testing a much more high-power version. And remember something at this time, we had seen all of these launches from these North Korean missiles, and they would launch, and then all of a sudden, for no particular reason whatsoever, they would just fail right after they would launch and then just crash into the sea with no explanation. And then after the Fitzgerald goes down, it was like the 17th of June. It was the 4th of July. North Koreans launch a missile, and it is absolutely the biggest success ever. No problems at all. They went from being the Keystone Cops doing it to being absolutely perfect, launching the thing damn near into space. And that's what this laser system would have been able to accomplish. It would have been able to burn right through the casing of one of these missiles and fry the electronics and cause it to crash into the sea. And with the Fitzgerald then gone, they were able to actually effect the launch that they did. See, the thing with this laser system, a lot of people didn't get, is that the lasers actually originate below decks, and they come up through the ship to the focusing mechanism on the deck. They require immense amounts of power, and they require a lot of cooling, which is what the seawater would have been used for. If there had been some hybrid cooling system aboard this thing that piped this seawater to cool this laser, and this would be a great way to cool a laser because you'd have pretty much unlimited access to freezing cold seawater. But this thing was drawing so much power to be ready to be fired at any moment in time when this thing got launched. And then they find themselves in this place where they have to go to full power to get out of the way of this destroyer that was, the cargo ship that was really aiming for it when you look at the track of the alleged track anyway, of the crystal, it looked like they were aiming for it. And they were trying to take this thing out. And the thing just pretty much did exactly like the article said it did. A light switch flip away from winking out the whole ship. And it would also explain, if I can find it here, this is the preliminary report. This is the one that came out in August. This came out actually before the issue with the McCain. And it talks here, 0143 General Quarters. It took them 13 minutes to call General Quarters. But 1MC didn't go down until much later. Why the damage officer who was asleep had to get thrown from her rack, get dressed, and then go to the command control center and then call General Quarters when 1MC was working all the way up until, let's see if I can find it here, 2:23, which is 3 minutes after they were able to apparently make a phone call to Desron. So collision at 1:30 and no report until 2:23. 2:40, Fitz reports loss of communications and loss of propulsion. This would explain it. And here's the other thing too. One of the questions that I asked, do you remember the story about how when the flooding happened and they were trying to secure these bulkheads and they were allowing sailors to dive back in to these areas to search for these lost shipmates? How did anyone know there weren't energized systems down there that could have electrocuted somebody? I mean, they couldn't have been absolutely sure about all areas down there. And at the time, I'm sure they were trying to get these systems back up and back powered again. It would have been an incredibly dangerous thing unless they knew. Unless they absolutely knew that there was no chance of there being juice down there at all. Anyway. Pretty sure this is a big piece of the puzzle. A light switch flip away from winking out the entire ship. That's just amazing. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.